welcome back. Today we are talking about Passing, a film that just premiered on Netflix this week. Passing narrates how the unexpected reunion between two old friends triggers a mutual obsession, which threatens both their realities. The film is actress Rebecca Hall's directorial debut, and what a debut! I thought she did a beautiful job of articulating how perceptions of race are not just in how other people see us, but in how we see ourselves, and more so than that, how we weigh these perceptions in determining our value or worth. The film stars Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga as Claire and Renee, and I think Tessa Thompson gives her best performance ever. I fundamentally changed how I see her as an actress. Up until this point, she's had these like cool girl roles. I don't know, like she's kind of like, she hasn't had anything very substantive up until this point, I feel, and it really, like the degree of vulnerability that she was able to bring as a wife, as a mother, and just as an individual contemplating her own value was phenomenal in my opinion. And I think the film does a good job of keeping us focused on Claire and Renee, and so it really feels like we're seeing things through their eyes. So the first performance I want to talk about is Ruth as Claire, and the degree of self-loathing and self-hate in Claire is really kind of astounding, right? Because at first the contrast between Renee and Claire, it was so stark that it threw me off. You know, it's just so performative, and I'm like, why is she overacting? And you realize she's not overacting, right? She's really trying to act confident. She's acting like someone who's acting confident. And this is to mask this air of desperation, you know, and shame that's just written all over her face. And at first, this air of confidence is able to kind of fool Renee into thinking like, did she make the right decision? Could it really be this easy? And her confidence is kind of a tool which is used to explore this theme of happiness. Specifically, like, why is Claire so unhappy? Is Claire unhappy that in passing as a white woman, it didn't really bring her the peace of mind that she thought it would? Or is it that in passing as a white woman, it pretty much ended any and all hopes of ever having like a degree of intimacy of any substance with anyone ever again? There's so much chemistry between the two characters, and there's so much to read into. Like Claire really grasps onto Renee to the point where she really sees her as like, you know, her like life, like her, the more she's able to kind of weave herself in, the more she's able to kind of rejuvenate herself. And there's a scene where Claire basically states like, I've thought about you a lot, but I don't think you've thought about me. And I think the reason that Claire really kind of latches onto Renee is because her life effectively froze when she started passing as a white woman. And I think the reason that Renee hasn't really thought of her as much, or not as, you know, obsessively as Claire has, is because she didn't really allow these perceptions of race to manipulate her into thinking that the grass is greener like on the other side. The grass is not greener anywhere. And speaking of Tessa Thompson, I want to talk about Renee. This is her best performance, like hands down. And at first, she's fascinated with Claire, right? She's kind of jaw-dropped, like the audacity of her friend. And she kind of, it has her contemplating her own life, right? It has her contemplating whether or not she made the right decision. Like, she has so much guilt. The more she interacts with Claire, the worse she feels. And the way Claire's influence over Renee's life is sort of illustrated, again, I really loved how this movie shows and doesn't tell, is through the conflict between her and her husband. So the main sort of, the cause of tension between Renee and her husband is when and how to discuss race with their children. And I think that Renee feels a degree of guilt that her boys have to become adults a lot faster, and it's sort of exacerbated, and it's sort of, she's made to feel worse, especially when she's comparing her life to Claire, whose daughter lives as a privileged white girl. She goes to Switzerland. You know, she's living her life as a kid, and her children don't really have that same opportunity. And she really feels like there's that guilt where I wondered how much of her, she really doesn't want to discuss race in the house. And I wonder how much of that is her own kind of, like she's kind of wondering if she made the right decision in having children that would kind of go through life in America with so much hate kind of directed towards them. So a lot of the tension you see with her and her husband, it keeps getting worse and worse. And that's as Claire is becoming kind of a fixture in their house. And the way that Claire kind of bleeds into Renee's life is kind of really nicely shown at the end of the film. And the end of the film is something you'll either like or you'll really dislike, right? Because there's a lot of questions to be asked. First, why didn't Renee tell Claire that she saw her husband, you know? And was it an accident? Did she push her out of the way? Like, what really happened? And I think what I gathered from the ending, especially as you see Claire's body at the end, and as you see like Renee just standing there with her hand out, I think as desperately as Renee wanted to help Claire, she just didn't really know how to help Claire without sort of disrupting her own peace of mind, right? Although her presence brought Claire a lot of peace, the reverse was not true. So in the end, Renee was left kind of, you know, speechless. So overall, I thought this was a fantastic film. The direction, the score, the black and white, it was just so beautifully executed. And a lot of care and attention went into body language. It went into, again, showing us and not telling us. So this can be an especially frustrating film because you feel like you're kind of waiting for something to happen and there's nothing kind of big that happens, you know, like you're waiting for that drawn out conversation, like some type of spoon feeding that doesn't really happen here. And at the same time, there's a lot you could read into. So I'm interested to see how people read into this, because you don't really have the inner dialogue of each character, right? Like you don't have them kind of narrating their thoughts. So a lot of what they're thinking, we have to kind of analyze again through the acting, through the body language. So I thought it was a very, very thoughtful film. I thought a lot of heart went into it. And you just felt like, again, like they executed this film to the best of their ability. I thought Ruth's performance as Claire was fantastic, especially as this woman who's just, you know, desperately clinging on to life. And again, hands down, Tessa Thompson's best performance that I've seen. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.